All right, so I'm coming out of Google Cloud Next a couple of weeks ago, and I cannot tell you how many people referenced a CTO Advisor podcast episode, and I felt a little bad because I haven't been producing the podcast as consistently. I'm with this much bigger company, Future. I have a big title. I'm a global advisor. I've been upgraded from the CTO Advisor to a global advisor. What does that
Ooh,
mean? I don't know. And we'll get into that later, but the opportunity to talk to one of our previous guests, one of my uh I think more entertaining guests, Miles Ward, CTO of SATA. Welcome back to the podcast.
thank you, Keith. I appreciate that. I aim to be entertaining. I was super excited to reach out to you about this one because my they killed my baby. The snowmobile's getting shut down, and I know too much, so I'm looking forward to talk shop.
So I'm looking forward to this conversation because I know this as I looked at the announcement, I kind of said, hmm, I don't know the details of why they didn't share why, but I could infer to why they would, some reasons why Snowmobile may be a little bit past its prime. But let's talk about, kind of the origin of Snowmobile. Break it down to us. What is it? What was the use case for it? And, why does any of this even matter?
Sure. So I was in the first 100 employees at AWS, and one of the most incredible folks there built out the whole patent program. And he said, if you come up with something you think hasn't been done in cloud, I want to hear about it. I said, great. So I sat on a plane next to a movie producer who described the complexity of on-site shoots with 3D cameras, 120 hertz, all the color resolution that they need, and they were bringing out half racks of storage equipment, and they would have to call stop on set because they ran out of disk space to be able to keep the cameras rolling. Now, that all that sounds like a bad problem. In the meantime, I've been working selling Apple S3 and helping everybody consume petabytes on the S3 side. And I'm looking at what you can actually get in a half rack locally deployed, going, well, of course that sucks. Like, that's just going to be terrible. So I'm sitting with this producer he's a pretty technical guy too. He's bought a bunch of gear. And we start ginning up this experiment we want to run. Like, if I put a bunch of storage gear in a Prius, then I'd have a generator on site. That's kind of cheating. I can bring gas cans with me. I can carry way more than you can put in like a shippable storage container because I can just drive it there. And if I showed up with wire, I could run it out to run 100 gig Ethernet or whatever, Mellanox or whatever cable connectivity you want. And then I could drive it back to one of the Amazon regions and plug in, and voila, it would all just be objects in S3. I laid out all this crazy technical shit about how to do the replication on Amazon's. The S3 system is built on this thing called a tree topology, whatever. So I laid this whole design out, and I explained this to Eric, the crazy inventor lead, and he's like, "Well, that's nuts. We should file a patent for that." So we do that, and then I bail. I end up going to Google. I'm working. Eric Schmidt pulls me over to work as the first solutions architect for Google Cloud, and they drive that snowmobile on stage. I'm like, what the shit? So I send a chat message to Werner. I'm like, Werner, is that the Prius? That's an awful big Prius. And he's like, oh, if you were still here, we'd have let you drive it on stage. You made terrible choices. So that's just like a knife in the chest. Werner's digging me around in there.
Yeah,
But
that's
the use case, the core of that is like, if I can put 100 petabytes local to a big data center facility that's got hopefully more than that storage, and I'm going to truck it back to any one of the AWS facilities. At the time, there were only 3 major regions in the US. Now there's more, but we calculated if you filled the box, which is just a full 40-foot shipping container, and drove it from New York to LA, you were doing so at 6.4 gigabits a second, which is pretty fucking fast. So, or not gigabits, sorry, terabits a second, 6.4 terabits a second. So that's like actually fast. So that, uh, there are plenty of data center facilities that piled up storage, but just did not have the connectivity to be able to effectively migrate to cloud. And that would make the migration plans look like 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, 5-year things where Amazon and all the cloud providers, frankly, are trying to do them way faster. So they saw it more as of an enabler for non-cloud to cloud migration and dragging all that data up to the farm. I always thought of it as kind of more of an edge enabler where you'd be able to share around. Of course, it's kind of hard to drive a 40-foot container truck to your average movie set, but that's kind of how it all got started.
So that's a great origin story. And, snowmobile, snowball edge, I think was the
Yep.
kind of HCI type solution to build out. I think obviously this, especially with sovereign cloud
Mm,
and Dora in Europe, people are trying to figure out how to make use of local data stores to one, be in compliance with regulatory concerns, and then two, even with the uh, challenges around availability around accelerators, the fastest data transfer is still the data transfer you don't have to make. So
oh
talk
yeah.
to me a little bit about. We'll go on a little bit of a tangent, and we'll get back to like the demise of the
Sure.
snowmobile. What are you seeing when it comes to customers and their challenges around data and data sovereignty?
Sure. I helped design really early on a bunch of Google's push into what now they call Google Distributed Cloud Hosted, which is a system that allows them to run Anthos and the underlying container management infrastructure and the VM management infrastructure that's required to stand up effectively a private region of Google Cloud. So today, Thales, effectively like infrastructure and train company in France, T Systems in joint with T-Mobile and the other components in Germany. Those two, as well as a couple of others that are in planning, are already deployed functional sovereign clouds in Google's ecosystem, and Amazon and Azure have similar building blocks. I think Oracle at one point was advertising if you just sort of stroke the pen efficiently enough, they would deploy an entire region wherever you wanted one. So everybody has gotten to a place where at least some flavor of their offering is deployable in a way that is sovereign. The complexity for all that in most cases is that in order to really do that, not only does the gear have to be in your location sovereign, and the software has to be licensed and owned in a way that is sovereign to the legal jurisdiction that you're talking about, but the people, the staff, have to be citizens or legally authorized to do that kind of work. So like I remember taking a long phone call with the folks from TOS when we started out with them, and it was all about what is SRE? How do we
Hmm.
train people to run this thing they're going to hand us called a region? Because Google won't run it for you. They wouldn't be allowed to. They don't have. They're not going to put hundreds of French citizens in the French region to sort of operate it on your behalf. They expect if you're going to deploy this thing that you as a provider want to do that work. That's why you're reaching out about asking it and taking it on. I think the last thing Google wants to do is vend a bunch of staff to other companies. So that whole line of questioning and the complexity there. I mean, like, you think it's hard to get certifications on AI stuff or solutions architecture work or the other kinds of enablement. There's no good training courses today on what does it take to run a Google region or what does it take to run an Oracle region or an Azure region or any of the rest of that. It's very specialized stuff. So I think as much as countries want it, I remember mentioning to Urs at one point that this seemed like the most tractable problem in computer science, right? There's only 192 or 196 countries. Just deploy a region in all of them, and then you're done. Like you're just actually done. You have one in every jurisdiction. Success. But they're all, none of the companies are even close to that. I think the biggest country coverage right now is Azure with something like 16. So it goes to show you how much there is left to do to get this into everybody's legal jurisdiction.
Yeah, and couple with that security concerns, data gravity, which we'll get back to. We. I think I came up with this concept. I didn't go out as much as Dave McCurry did, who came up with the data uh, gravity concept and theory. I've had him
Mm-hmm.
on the podcast a couple of times to talk about it. There is a actual theory. There's algorithm behind it, But I challenged him a couple of years ago and said, you know what, services are starting to have gravity. And he calls it more inertia. I don't care what you call it, but I can't get vertex inside of my data center as easily as I
Sure.
don't know I need vertex. So in order to get vertex, I need to ship my data somewhere for that to happen because that service is that important to me to be able to take advantage of it. So, we're having these extremely unique challenges where we can't necessarily build, and you stated this, we can't build the services cloud providers can build, but yet our data is on
Yeah.
site. Hence the snowmobile. Okay, let's get the value is worth the risk. Let's get the data up there. We need to get it up there and at 6 gigabits per second.
Yeah.
Uh
Terabits a second. Yeah, that's
Terabits, I'm sorry,
healthy.
terabits, because I've
Yeah, yeah.
had
I'm
10 gig
through that.
connections, I've had 100 gig connections in the data center before, and they're just not big enough. So, you're at the practitioner level, you're doing massive projects. What do you think
Oh
is
yeah.
the demise of something like a snowmobile?
So, I mean, I led the migration for Twitter before it was called X, from their private data centers into Google Cloud's facilities. And they had 360 petabytes active in what is inarguably the largest Hadoop cluster in the world. And they didn't like it anymore because Hadoop's terrible. And BigQuery is a lot better.
Oh,
And we
I was
proved
just about
that
to say, I'm
BigQuery was
sorry, but that's a
yeah, yeah,
long.
that's a heartbreaking state, right? Like, this is the lovely part of my career, right? Like Hadoop inarguably, absolutely saved my startup. Like, reduced our cost by 3 orders of magnitude to build the indexes that we need to in comparison to SQL Server. And now, just 15 years later, we sort of giggle about it. And of course, you got to tear that shit out of your data center. So, the when we did the deployment for Twitter, that you have exactly this option, right? Like, somebody could bring a snowmobile out, somebody could bring a large format. There's a couple of competitive services from Equinix and Megaport that would do the same kind of thing. And we looked at their existing physical footprint and built 8 100 gigabit a second GBIC connected links over Juniper devices into Google's facilities and transferred the data over 43 days. And if you think about what kind of a pain in the neck it is to find a parking spot for the truck and get the wire through the security doors into the racks and then make sure the security people are eyeballing it all the correct times of day and night. All that stuff might take more than 43 days to figure out. So I think at the end of the day, and we were moving 3.5 times what would fit in a snowmobile if even that was available as an option. So I think what Amazon certainly found, and Google found quite a bit earlier, as they have a network that's some 7 times the throughput of the public internet. So they are way leaned into grabbing fiber everywhere. Is that the you have to have a lot of data in some place really weird where it's hard to get big fiber in order to be able to have a solution like a snowmobile actually make sense. And so it ended up not getting used all that often. I think the original one that I proposed that was a lot smaller probably would get used a lot more often because the latency would be commensurately lower, right? We had all the time customers would show up with 2 suitcases full of external drives to a Google office and say, I want to move to the cloud. You guys have bandwidth like God. Like, can you help me plug all these things in? And we're like, this is not actually what we do but yeah, sure, shit, yeah, let's roll, right? And we would set everybody up and we'd move a bunch of data that way. So I think the metro area city latency of driving around is probably viable. Like, semi size was maybe better for the press release than really the actual use
The
case.
practical pieces of it. And
Yeah,
then I think you make a huge point that when it first came out, there was 3 regions.
yeah,
Now there's regions, there's zones, there's
yeah. They're all
partnerships with Equinix, other data center
yeah.
providers. So if you can get your data relatively close to one of these providers, you can ingest the data much quicker than you can.
Hmm.
You look at the size of hard drive of SSDs now. held in my hand during GTC Solidigm has a 61.44 terabyte, which for the note
Yeah,
Solidigm, you're listening to this, you promise you get me one, a 61 terabyte SSD, low power
that's healthy.
devices. You have a suitcase of those, and you get it
Yeah.
into a co-location that has the direct connects directly into all of the cloud providers. The cross connects into the cloud providers. You have essentially near cloud speeds, capabilities that you can either ingest the data or leave the data as there. Google has
Hmm.
BigQuery. And you can do amazing things with BigQuery across platforms. So I
Yeah.
think that the idea was cool. Like, the truck. I've been trying to
Yeah.
get folks to sponsor putting the data center in the CTO Advisor
Yeah.
Flying Cloud, which I'm recording from now. Cool idea. It's niche.
Yeah.
It gets eyeballs coming. People are going to come look at it. But at the end of the day, I think we're finding that there's just more practical solutions.
Yeah. Two things there, right? Like you were talking earlier about uh, you know, uh, about the kind of distribution of workloads, the things you can build in cloud, you can't build in data center, and it'd be nice if the software showed up there. Google is clearly pushing in that direction. The first real offering there is this. They set it up so that the Vision AI model could be run in Anthos on prem. So that's them taking a Google managed, Google supplied, Google certified, all the various SLAs and contractual obligation bits, and they put that thing in a facility on your side. Now, I think most customers were like, well, that's one API. I want the other 806 of them, and would have preferred the entire regional footprint. The last time I talked to Google about the actual total regional services count, because remember, Google Cloud is made out of stuff, some of which was built for Google Cloud, like say GKE, which was designed in concert with the Google Cloud team, and some products which predate Google Cloud by quite a lot. So, like BigQuery is Dremel, is a pre Borg hosted, runs on the internal Google 3 data systems that are distinct from the stuff that's built above that layer in Google. So any of the really shiny shit that Google built for itself before they even thought about cloud is really difficult to pry out and cram someplace else. Even given that difficulty, they figured out how to do it on the other clouds. So BigQuery Omni allows you to run the BigQuery code base on Amazon or on Azure. You can write a query that federates data from S3 and GCS and get results in the BigQuery terminal, and it does the processing Amazon side. It's an incredible architecture. They built a crazy thing. So they also have Dataflow, Omni, and a couple others. So I think over time, with the Omni initiative, they're going to try to get as many of these services running in as many facilities, and hopefully more of the bare metal facilities and local customer facilities as possible. The other toy, if you want toys, Western Digital just came out with this thing. It's called an Ultra Star Transporter, and it's kind of looks kind of like one of those Halliburton suitcases, right? Like a little tiny attaché case, but it's 384 terabytes. So, like that's my kind of size. It's perfect, right? Like it fits in a 19-inch. If you want to slide it into a rack rail, it doesn't have any rails off hanging off. You got to clip that stuff on. Comes with a little carry handle, and you can put, a third of a petabyte in your carry-on. Like that's perfect. That's just great.
Yeah, and I think these types of solutions, uh, I don't know what the lead time was for to get a snow bill out to market,
Oh,
but
months.
the things change fast. Like,
Yeah, man.
you have to adapt in the world. Last time we talked about the difference in cloud services from when you ran infrastructure for the political campaign you worked on to
Mm-hmm.
now, and how much the cost structure would be different.
Oh man,
Then,
so
coupled with
radically
that,
different.
how quickly AI, the models, I mean, Llama 3 was just announced. I don't know how many
Yeah, yeah.
parameters Llama 3. I have a hard time keeping up with
Lots.
all the stuff, but just priorities change. And even around this much data, the priority changes around this much data faster than we can, frankly, faster than we can move it. even in a snowmobile.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of situations where um, I remember from the very, very beginning in public cloud that the concept was always to be flexible to the specifics of customers' needs, to be able to pay only for what you use and use only the parts of things that you need and be able to programmatically manage all of that so you could be as nimble as your software is. And that pattern, data centers have gotten a lot cheaper and they've gotten a lot denser. And I think they've gotten to a place where they are a lot more reliable, right? I think a lot of early people that I spoke with when they came to cloud went because the uptime was great, and their data center would go offline for like days and shit, right? Like I remember working on those kinds of problems all the time. Now I think, a local data center probably caught up. Like the gap isn't nearly as big on reliability for base, virtual machines or something like that. But then all of a sudden, things change, and like VMware comes out and multiplies the cost of your data center by a factor of 10. So we're right back to like, hold on a minute, how do I get out of this thing and get over into GCP? I don't care how much the data costs to move. The compute just got costed a gazillion times more. So somebody help me figure out how to get out of here. So, I'm sure next year NVIDIA will change the pricing model on all these devices, and you'll keep swinging the pendulum back and forth between shit, I got to get everything to cloud, or shit, I got to get everything over into my data center. But wherever it is that stuff goes, I think it's critical for our customers and our users to recognize what we see every day is just this incredible diaspora. Their data's everywhere, their control layers are everywhere, their access and privilege, their logging is everywhere. The complexity we ask most CIOs and CTOs to take on this year is totally daunting in comparison to the way that these kinds of roles worked even 5, 10 years ago. So we have to give them a lot of grace because it's not an easy job.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to dust off my data infrastructure uh, framework that I was working on a few years ago that turned out to be repetitive, but the of research that's already been done. But the premise of it has been that it is much more important to put governance around your data than to worry about where it lands technically, because that's going to always change. Whether we're talking about
Mm-hmm.
SaaS, IaaS, on-prem, really doesn't matter. You need to have a framework for how you're going to share data in between systems, and you're going to need to have a framework around how you're going to secure that data. Because where the economies of scale to put that data, or where technically that data is going to be the fastest to services, all of that is going to change. What's not going to change is your policies around the data itself, and you need to understand the interfaces around how you're going to access the data and how you're going to protect that data. So, Miles, it's always great to talk to you. Where can people find out more about SADA?
Sure. SAD.com is super straightforward. A bunch of solutions materials and 200 plus customer case studies. You got details on the 1,500 successful migrations in the last couple of years. So we're 7 times in a row, back to back to back to back to back to back to back partner of the year on the Google side. And we do not intend to screw up the streak. I think if we get to 10, they'll call it a lifetime achievement award, and they'll invite us to sort of anoint other winners, and they'll give us a spot on the
Yeah,
board
you're
seat or
just
something like
you're
that. I
just
don't know.
kind of like emeritus. That you're
Yeah,
tenured.
yeah,
You have the
yeah,
tenureship.
and the email's not hard. It's Miles at SADA. It's not like it's complicated. I'm happy to talk shop with folks. Your last bit on like where the data goes. There's a great project, Bacalao, named after it's like code over data. They're a remote execution framework. That's a really interesting way to try to put the computation wherever the data happens to be as a model approach. So cool project from David Aronchick there. There's cool stuff to
I
look at.
have to try and check out the project and reach out to David to have a conversation with him.
You
All right.
should.
If you
You
want to
should.
find out more about the CTO Advisor, you can follow us on the web, thectoadvisor.com, and our parent company, futurumgroup.com, where we're doing all kinds of stuff like acquiring TechStrong. We have the intelligence platform, which I was supposed to drop a intelligence dime about, AI. I'll make sure to do that the next time, but check out app.futurumgroup.com. Talk to you next CTO Advisor podcast. Thanks a lot, Miles.
Hey, thank you. Cheers.